No Fugazee podcast. I'm your host, Cooley. We have a special guest tonight. Let's go. And y'all see the suit too, man. Listen, new studio, new podcast by the spirit, not by the letter. Bro, we can go verse for verse all day long. Doing new things. Men are okay with understanding the reality that we are in competition with one another. But you ladies think that you're special. You are in competition. Men are men of their word. So here's my word. I'll fly you out here and we can do it in person. And after that, we could box. I'm about my business. So remember I said, when I ask you these questions, I will dismantle your entire argument. That's the end of the debate, my dog.
I'm 39, but I don't look your typical 39.
Belly.
Yeah.
You look 39. It's okay though. That man isn't intimidated by a woman like you. He's annoyed by a woman like you. Because a man doesn't want to date another man. He wants to date a woman. All right, welcome back to No Fugazee podcast, ladies and gents. Tonight we have a special guest, Dyer, in the building. I'll be bringing him up. You've seen him on many debates. He's an expert in philosophy and debating and many different arguments. Some would say he's a master in apologetics and a master at many other things. But let's go ahead and welcome him to No Fugazee podcast. All right, that was new, man. I had some little chairs there for you, man. What's going on, Dyer?
What's up, dude? Really glad to be here with you. I've been watching some of your clips, and that intro there that reminded me of my 8 hours on whatever podcast. It's like a repeat of that whole 8 hours of madness of drama. But yeah, I'm here glad to talk to you about real debates. None of those were real debates; those were dumb debates. But yeah, we've been having some real ones lately.
Yeah, man, I've been seeing you. You just had a debate that Digital Social Hour hosted. I believe, when was that? Just the other day, right?
It was a couple of days ago. It kind of went up early on that dude's channel because he wanted to live stream it early. Okay. But Sean Kelly hasn't.
Yeah, Sean Kelly hasn't.
But it'll be up soon. But yeah, it was a fun one. I mean, it was just super low tier, but it's about like the women debates. I even told him in the middle of the debate, I was like, man, this is like debating all them women on whatever podcast. He thought that was pretty funny. So
yeah, I didn't get to watch a little bit of it. Well, I didn't get to watch hardly any of it. I just watched a little bit of Jim Bob reacting to it.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, okay, all right, I see. But you know, who was that guy? What is his name?
That's Brian Shapiro, and I wasn't really familiar with him either until he debated Andrew. And I think they may have had a couple debates, but yeah, he's a guy who's not leftist, but continually says basically all the left positions, and just really is just an anti-Trump guy. That's like, our topics were set as like immigration and God and this kind of stuff, and the whole debate ended up he wanted to do it about Trump. So really, he's just anti-Trump, but I can't really distinguish any of the other positions from just kind of mainline leftist type stuff. But yeah, that's all and I think he does a radio show, but I'm not a boomer, so I don't listen to radio, so I don't know. Yeah,
I say I don't listen to radio. So I wanted to, tell the audience kind of how I got introduced to you. So if everyone knows, I've been just debating for only about a year and a half now, maybe 2 years. I started getting into debating. I started off during, I would say, I like to call it the Great Awakening during the pandemic when everybody was locked in. I was debating mask mandates on an app called Clubhouse where there's no video, it's just audio. And then I started the Dating and Relationship podcast, debating, these 304s and stuff like that. But then I started to, debate other topics other than dating and relationships. And it started to open up my worldview more, and I had to find some type of grounding for the things that I believe in. And I came across, I think it was Dyer Archives. I'm not even sure if you own that channel.
No, that's a clips channel. The Dyer, there's a bunch of clips channels, but that one's not mine, but they do really good stuff over there.
Yeah. So I came across that as I was, just expanding my worldview and trying to buckle down on the truth. And one of the things that really gravitated towards, gravitated myself towards you was the tag argument, which at the time I didn't even understand. I was like, what is this guy talking about? All right, let me just move on to another video. So that was me. That was my introduction to you, just regular scrolling and stuff like that. And I happened to come across to it. But question for you, I like to get into the background of the people that I kind of interview. I like to get to know them and the audience to get to know them as well. Have you always been like a philosopher or a debater? Like, is that something that you wanted to do when you were young, or is this something that you gradually got into over time?
Yeah, good question. I did not have any real interest in this when I was younger. In high school, I was really into music and partying and women, theater. I was actually a theater kid, but I am heterosexual. I promise. I'm married, so I was not a true theater kid who I guess they're not really hetero. But so I was really into movies and entertainment, and I was really into comedy and that kind of stuff. And so it wasn't until about age 18 that when I went to college, I got interested in philosophy and philosophy of religion, and we had a debate team on campus. Back at that time, I don't think a lot of colleges even have that because they really kind of suppress people, learning critical thinking and being able to engage. I think they just want everybody to basically be zombies. So they doesn't really have that anymore. But back in 2001, 2, 3, when I was in college, I got really into the debate team and taking a lot of philosophy classes and did my undergrad philosophy. My sophomore year ended up debating a professor, actually one of the professors of philosophy of science. And so we had a pretty intense public campus debate, and I was getting into tag at the time. Been reading quite a bit on that.
So you were doing this for a while then, as far as...
when I was 21, I really got into tag for the first time, pretty heavy. I bought a lot of books on it, got heavy into philosophy. And that kind of kicked it off, and I just fell in love with doing it. I didn't do a lot of debates throughout the 2000s because internet wasn't really big then. It was kind of growing. Facebook wasn't even around yet. But by the time Facebook came around, I would, just debate people on the internet just kind of for fun. And then I think the first kind of real public formal debates that we got going were maybe 2014. I think the first public debate I did was with an atheist libertarian guy named Adam Kokesh. He was a lot bigger at the time. He's not really that well known now, but we did about a 2 or 3 hour podcast debate on God and libertarianism, and got quite a bit of views. And then I got another offer. Hey, you want to come debate this other atheist dude, JF Gary Epi, this French Canadian dude. And that got a whole lot of views, about 500,000 views back then on that, across a bunch of, platforms. And so that kind of just got the ball rolling, which I had always just focused mainly on the atheism-theism debate. Okay. And then I made friends with a guy who was really into Islamic studies in England. And he was pushing me, hey, Islam's coming to America. You need to really get up on debating Muslims. So the last 8 years, we actually focused pretty heavy on that. I do debate, Zionists, and we've debated a couple Jews here and there. But most of the time, the last 8 years, it's been a lot of the top Muslim dudes.
Yeah, and that's what I've been seeing. A lot of the, you debating the top Muslim guys, and from my worldview, in my point of view, it'd be totally destroying them. One of the other things that kind of got me, that gravitated myself towards you and your perspective and your debating style was, I always had a few principles about myself, some like little key things I learned. One of them was manipulation tends to happen when you focus on the effects instead of getting to the root, the cause of things. And when I started hearing your content, that's what you would get to. You're like a master at the pre-sub debating. And I was like, man, okay, that's how I could kill him. This is how I can fully defeat the argument. Can you speak about the importance of pre-sub debating?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, this really is the shortcut to winning most debates. The only times I've really had any real struggles or issues with that as a technique or an approach is when I'm debating some high-tier philosophy professor who knows that very well, which that's like 1 in a million people. So most of the time, if you have this approach, and I think if people watch that Brian Shapiro debate that we just did, the average normie type of person is just going to cut right to the issue, because most people just don't realize that whatever their positions, their opinions, their assertions that they have and the things that they say, they don't realize they're based on other things. They assume things to make those arguments and to make those claims. And most people don't even know how to make an argument. They think that arguments are arguing, right? Totally different things. Formal debating is very different from, arguing with your girlfriend or something like that, or your wife or whatever. It's way different. It has a structure, it has laws. And so the first thing that people don't know that's necessary is to know that there are laws to thought. They're called the laws of logic. And that's really what critical thinking is following those laws of critical thinking. So when you come to a debate, you're actually coming to something more like a chess game than it is arguing or yelling or whatever. And so if you understand that, you're right away, 50 miles ahead of everybody else in the race. So one of the things I learned early on was most people don't know basic logical fallacies. And if you know just the basic informal ones, again, you're way ahead of everybody else, because they don't even realize when they're making arguments on the basis of emotion, or they're making arguments on the basis of their own personal anecdotal experience. None of those things constitute good arguments. They're bad reasons for the beliefs. So most people just don't even think about the fact that we all have beliefs, but do we have good reasons for our beliefs? And that gets into this crucial domain of what's called epistemology, which is just our doctrine or our theory of knowledge. How do we know what we know? What do we know? Is it possible to know things? And what are the good reasons for the beliefs or the knowledge that we have? So, philosophy, and last thing I'll say on this is, if you go back to the earliest days of Western philosophy with Socrates, what he did was, if you don't know philosophy, it's a really great essay to start with. Just read the Apology of Plato. It's not that long, and it's pretty easy to understand. Basically, Socrates just walks around Athens and he says, I'm going to ask everybody from a different type of lifestyle, what is the meaning of life, and what are we supposed to do, and what is wisdom? And it turns out, well, the guy who's in the theater, he thinks that acting in theater is the meaning of life. And the politician thinks that politics is the meaning of life. And the artisan thinks that his craft is the meaning of life. And so you realize that everybody just saw life through their own immediate personal experience. And he wondered, well, is there something more objective going on? Maybe none of these people know. And so he goes to the oracle at Athens, and the oracle of Delphi says, you're the wisest man. And Socrates says, how can I be the wisest man? I don't know jack shit. And the oracle says, only because you had the process of questioning are you actually the wisest man. Because it's not that Socrates didn't know anything, but he was willing to go through challenging his presuppositions and everybody else's. So that's really the birth of Western philosophy, is actually questioning presuppositions. And I think if you know that, again, these basic points I've made, you're way ahead of everybody else, because nobody else knows this stuff. Education is dog shit in America. So nobody's taught this stuff. And that right there, boom, you can go cut right to the issue and immediately just kind of turn the arguments on everybody else. There's a lot of other things too that go with it, like internal critique and, calling out the fallacies and that kind of stuff. But
yeah, man. And that was one of the things that really, I was like, all right, I gotta, cause I was debating a lot of women on my show. Started off with doing a dating and relationship show, and then transitioned into doing debates like 6 or 8 months after that. And, since I'm a Christian and, I'm non-denominational, man. I know you're going to hate that. Come on, bro. You're non-denominational. You're basically not a Christian. I know you guys like to critique me on that, right? I'm still in discovering, my lane. But I would say, as far as the ortho bros, you, Andrew, and what they like to call y'all, right? You, Andrew, Jim Bob, and also a few others out there. I think his name is DPH. Yep, him as well. And a few other people. You guys have good arguments for your worldview. I think you guys defend your worldview great, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as, in my opinion, wouldn't even be biased, because I'm listening to other Christians defend their worldview, and it's just like, they have the best arguments. They have the best logic behind it. It makes the most coherent sense. It's easy to understand and things of that sort. But a question on, so what I found myself as I've been debating more topics, I'm debating, evolution now. I'm debating, I'm doing apologetics now. People are saying, Cooley, why are you getting into this type of stuff? I'm like, well, I'm trying to seek truth. And one of my things is, as I'm seeking truth, I didn't come from a background like you. I got a high school education, right? So I was playing sports. I'm a very, I would like to say, competitive individual. So for me, it was like, I'm not going to turn down any debate. I'll go ahead and accept them all. So since I'm accepting all of these debates and also doing open panel debates and having weird people come in with their weird worldviews and challenging myself, it's like, well, I'm more motivated now to learn and to become a better debater and actually get to the truth of things. Which is why what kind of made me gravitate towards, you guys, the ortho bros, some would say, and like, okay, they just have the best arguments right now. And Jay Dyer, he's killing it. Jim Bob is killing it. Andrew Wilson, everyone knows that he's killing it. But I found myself, the more I learn, the more it was harder to decipher which argument I'm going to use to be able to defeat someone, because now I have like a more vast level of knowledge, and I have multitude of different arguments that I can use to defeat someone's position. Mm-hmm. How do you decipher which argument that you're going to use to defeat someone's position when you have so many tools in your toolbox to destroy them?
That's a good question, because one thing that I think is really crucial to know as you get to be more of a mature debater is it's a really crucial skill to be able to tailor the argumentation to the audience. And so if you're kind of aware of the audience, and if you're able to communicate something that's perhaps a pretty technical, difficult aspect of debate or philosophy or whatever to a mass audience, that's the crucial skill, because everybody should know you're probably not going to convince your opponent. Most debates are not about convincing the opponent. It's about the rhetorical persuasion and objectively good arguments that you have that convince, hopefully, the audience. So the audience is the key target, not this dude over there on the other side of the screen or this chick or whatever. It's the audience. And if you can very precisely and in a practical way make these arguments accessible, that's a really important skill set. I think Andrew really excels at that. I think Andrew's been, able to somehow figure out the best way to make really complex arguments practical. I know a lot of the technical stuff, but sometimes it's difficult if I'm doing a technical critique of somebody's presuppositions to try to convey that to an audience who doesn't care about philosophy. So one of the things that came up in the Brian Shapiro debate the other day was actually a really, it providentially just worked out excellent, to where he made this bad argument where he said, look, you think that, homosexuality or these kinds of things, you think that those are choices. They're not choices people make. They're all conditioned from birth to have these proclivities. And I said,
he made the birth argument. Yeah.
If that's the case, then it seems logical also that I would also have the conditioning to be religious, and you call me a bigot because I have morals and I can't judge anybody's moral lifestyle. Well, then I'm just conditioned to be a bigot according to you. Yeah. And there's nothing morally wrong with that, because you can't get an ought from just what is the case. So I think when that hit, that was a really crucial point in the debate for making because I could have gone with the route of something like, and I did a little bit in that debate, I could have argued that, you're making universal claims, and universal claims can't be made if you are a finite individual with just empirical sense data. You have no access to universal states of affairs. Yep. And I tried a little bit to convey that, but I think it was just too...
He didn't understand.
It was too much for him and the audience. So I just brought it back to, okay, well, if everything's conditioned, then I'm conditioned to be a bigot. And he was just like, what? so no, if you can take those difficult issues and make them just super practical, that's the best way.
Simplify it. Yeah.
But if I'm debating a professor, I'm probably not going to do that. I'm going to just say, I'm going to keep it high tier, and I'm going to choose the more difficult but most devastating argument. I usually just go for the jugular pretty quick. I don't like to yap. Early on, I would try to argue a lot, talk a lot. As I've gotten older, I just, boom, let's go right to the jugular.
Yeah, as I seen when I, started watching your content, I'm like, yeah, he destroys people from the root. He doesn't even give them a chance. And most of the time, the people that I've seen you debate, they don't even understand your questioning, and they don't understand the argument. They don't understand that maybe it's
conversations happening.
Yeah, it's like two different conversations happen. I'm like, the debate is over. He just destroyed you, and they're still like fighting with themselves. One of the other things that I would say in regards to what you just said, because I debated someone just the other day, he had a similar worldview. He asked me the question, well, the Bible teaches that, being gay is a sin and that it's bad and it's evil and they're against gay people and all of this other type of stuff, right? And then he's like, well, I'm like, well, do you think people are born gay? He's like, yeah. And I used a similar route. I just was like, well, if you think people are born gay, then that means that people are born with with a proclivity to do a sin, like to be a murderer, to steal, to do all types of crazy things. So no, I definitely get that. And that's like a lower tier response to a debate. But you just explained that there's higher tiers. It's definitely effective. It's definitely effective. Yeah.
Well,
good stuff.
Go ahead.
No. I was just saying good stuff. That was perfect.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not, and I'm so used to not debating a lot of like political type of stuff that, and I mean, I know the homosexuality is not really political. It's partly political, but I don't think I've ever had a debate on that topic. I'm almost always debating, Muslims or atheists, something like that. So this one was a much more politically focused debate. So a lot of the topics ended up being way more practical, right? So like, well, is it good for a nation to have infinity, dudes coming in from another country? I don't think it is, right? So we can argue whether that's good for the society. And of course, he says, well, it is good for society. Well, okay, well, then what's the good here, right? And of course, most atheist materialists have no objective standard of the good. And so if you get a little bit of basic philosophy down, you can usually do pretty well in debates too by just knowing, okay, well, you're saying this, what's the measure for those things, right? So when you're saying good for the country to have infinity, Muslims, infinity, Swami's brother, welcome. We will have 1 billion people come to the Americas. Right. If you're going to have 1 million H-1B dudes coming in, how in any scheme is that good for the country? And I said, well, is it good for Japan? Does Japan have to take 1 million migrants? And he eventually bit the bullet. He was like, yeah, they should. They ought to. Okay. So you got all this weird morals now. And I'm like, what's the basis for the good and for these morals? He says, what I like, what I want. I'm like, dude, come on. Are we kids? Like, are you in elementary school? What do you want? Come on. What's the objective reason for why that's good versus something else, like limiting immigration?
Yeah.
No answer, right? So again, most people are unfortunately in this really low tier NPC kind of frame, but every now and then you'll get people a little more sophisticated where you kind of have to go into, some depth. But even with most of those people, I mean, I've debated a lot of academics and professors over the years, and there's only been one or two that were actually able to kind of handle pre-sup at a significant level. Most of even the academics are like I had that debate with that atheist guy, J.F. Gary Epi, like 10 years ago. It was the first high profile debate. And, everybody thought he was going to just demolish me because I think he has a PhD in neuroscience or something. But a lot of those people in academia, and I know because I was in academia, they're very niche in their subject matter. So they'll know all about, some part of the pineal gland or something like that. They don't even know what the laws of logic are. They don't know what a law of non-contradiction is, right?
Yeah.
So they'll have an overconfidence about what they're debating outside of their realm of knowledge and expertise. And then that's very easy to trip these people up. And one thing I do in debates is I kind of tend to let people talk. And the more they talk, the more they're hanging themselves because I just take note of all these things they're saying. And I've got a little, memo pad in my mind back here. Well, 5 minutes ago you said this, and then now you're saying this, right? If you watch that Brian Shapiro debate, half of that debate was just him contradicting within like 2 minutes.
Yeah, him talking.
And it's the same with a lot of these other debates too. Is like if you let people talk, let them hang themselves. The more they talk, then you're able to pull out these contradictions. Just do an internal critique, and there you go.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've learned. Most of my most viewed debates is when I tend to let the people speak, let them hang themselves, and then I, give a rebuttal and then refute the argument, catch them in a contradiction. But it's just so like when you know that they're speaking nonsense, you just want to just attack them, attack, and destroy. But no, that is a debate tactic, and that takes patience. Yeah, that is one of the things that does take patience. I would actually say that I have more patience debating the women on my channel than debating men. It's like, come on, bro, you're a guy. Like, you should get these things. Better, dude. You should be doing better. Like, you're a man. What's going on here? Yeah. Like with women, I just tend to be more because, like, you're a chick. All right, obviously, you live a different experience than I do. You're right. But so for me, when I started thinking in more of a logical way and the understanding the laws of logic, the law of identity, the law of excluded middle, the law of non-contradiction, and kind of wrapping my responses around that, and also tying in observing my opponent's arguments based off of that.
Yeah.
What I've also learned, which I heard you say many times, was every worldview consists of epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics. Can you tell me why that's important to understand that, to be able to use that against your opponent to defeat them?
Yeah. This is you went right where I was going to go, which is a lot of people are super lazy too. Like, they don't actually take the time to study another person's perspective if they're going to do a debate. Most of the formal debates that we've done over the last several years, like, I always go through multiple debates that the opponent has done so that I know his game plan, right? I mean, everybody should know this from sports, right? You study the other team's playbook. You want to know their moves. You want to know what their hand signs mean to, do a
And quick question on that. What's your preparation for debates? Like, do you normally spend like a few days debating your opponent's worldview, getting an understanding of their position and stuff like that? What's your normal preparation for that?
So the Muslim debates were way more intensive than that because I didn't really know much about Islam 8 years ago. So pretty much every Muslim opponent that I've debated, they're within Islam and Dawah. They're pretty high tier. Sheikh Asrar Rashid, Shabir Ali, Daniel Hakikachu, Jake, Muslim Lantern. I mean, those are all kind of dudes that the Muslims respect and look up to and have some degree of some pedigree. So for all of those debates, I went pretty intensive. In fact, it was more than just a few days. With most of those, I think I read multiple books because most of those topics were pretty precise. So I really wanted to hone in on, like, in the case of Jake, Muslim metaphysician, I remember I had to buy like a $80 obscure British publication of Ibn Taymiyyah, and like I went through like hundreds of pages of Ibn. It was so boring, dude. It was like, but now that debate was a lot of preparation. But like, if it's an atheist, most of them don't have books. But like when I did the Matt Dillahunty debate, I remember watching 2 or 3 Matt Dillahunty debates. So that was like 2 or 3 days prep. So usually a couple days prep and watching some of their other debates. But on a couple occasions with Muslims or like really high tier studied Roman Catholics, I've done significant reading for those.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and that's the Matt Dillahunty debate. That's one of the first ones that I seen, because that was about 6 years ago, I believe, 6 or 5 years ago.
2020.
Yeah, and I seen you defeated him with tag with that. Another question, right? Because I've been utilizing tag and I've been trying to perfect my craft with tag, right? Where did this argument derive from? And can you explain the proper way how it should be formulated?
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, I did want to address the other. You asked about the 3 elements of a worldview and why that's really crucial and associated with tag. Because if you know those 3 things, most people don't know that everybody has a worldview. Meaning you have some basic set of beliefs or commitments that you don't typically question or think about. And those commitments and those preconditions or presuppositions, they kind of underlie and undergird all the other beliefs that you have. So, you believe that tomorrow the sun's going to come up. You believe that it's wrong to murder people. You have all these beliefs, and they rest on some assumption about ethics, what's right and wrong, as you said, epistemology, how do we know what we know, what can we know, et cetera, and metaphysics, which is what is real, what exists, what doesn't exist, et cetera. So everybody has a worldview, which is those 3 domains of philosophy. Even if they don't know philosophy, they have beliefs about that. So if you can study those 3 topics, and even you don't have to go deep into it or get a PhD, but you can study the basics of those domains. Again, you're going to be way ahead of everybody else because most people don't know that. And whenever they're saying something like, well, it's wrong to, do this or that, it's wrong to go out and kill people, it's wrong to steal this and that. Okay, well, but why is it wrong? And how do you know that that's wrong, right? Well, God doesn't exist. Okay, well, how do you know that? And on what basis? And what's the reason that you think that? Most people don't think that deep. And so when you start asking them those questions, they kind of, because that's what I think. You know what I mean? Most people have that sort of default, like, bad line of reasoning. and you've got them right there, because if you've got a thought out worldview, if you're grounded in your perspective, you're ready for those kinds of questions. Most people are not ready for those kinds of questions. So that's why presuppositions are really just honing in on and analyzing the things that undergird people's beliefs and assertions. So that's what you're going for. That's what you're looking at. And if you can take out that foundation, the whole system crumbles, right? Because remember, all this other stuff that they've got up here on their upper layer of beliefs that they've got kind of in the frontispiece, you're going straight to what's underneath that and ripping that out, and all this other stuff crumbles. Because anything else they say is going to be based on that thing that you've already taken out, that foundation. So that's what presuppositions are all about, or pre-commitments, or what we're just calling tag. That just means, in fancy philosophy terms, that's arguing for God's existence in a logical way that is not like some sort of empirical evidence. So basically, it's still an argument, it's still an evidence, but it's not evidence like we think of physical evidence in a crime scene or a court case. You're making a logical argument about an internal critique of another person's three elements of a worldview. And usually the easiest to critique is ethics, because that's a lot more accessible to most people than theory of knowledge or metaphysics, right?
Yeah.
Like we mentioned Andrew earlier. Andrew's really good at picking out the ethical issue and then asking them for the kind of basis for the ethics. And that resonates with most people because, even low tier sort of, just terrible debaters will immediately go to, you're a bad person, right? So everybody just wants to jump on ethics and why they're better than everybody else, because that's just kind of a human pride issue.
Yeah, like
and
the
they
virtue
think it's
signal.
the shortcut to winning a debate, right? If you watch that Brian Shapiro debate, I don't mean to keep bringing this one up. It's just a funny one. Like,
it's the most recent one too.
Them saying why I'm bad and why everybody's bad and Trump's bad and all men are bad. It's like, dude, you don't have a basis for even what bad is. It's just all like what you don't like. And he's like, yeah, so. Yeah. Okay, well, that's not a debate, right? That's just you telling us your preferences. Okay, we don't care what your preferences are in a debate. We want to know what the argument is for why we ought to accept your position. So, yeah, presuppositions and tag and all that, it's just fancy terminology for saying I'm going to undercut all the stuff that you're yapping about and saying by ripping out from underneath you the fact that it's built on sand and you're saying a bunch of gibberish when you don't have a basis for what that rests on. Oh, really? All of this is wrong. This is all wrong. And almost, I would say probably 95% of people, when you ask them, why is something wrong? Because I feel like it's wrong. It's wrong.
I feel like it's wrong. Yeah. And
well, I feel like it's right.
It's funny. I debated an emotivist the other day, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, morals is just an expression of the emotions, boo, ah, stuff like that." But one of the arguments that I used on him was one of Jim Bob arguments. I said that, have you ever done something that was good, but you felt bad about it? In which it took apart his argument, because then he says, well, what do you mean by no? Like, do I know that it's good? You're making like, is that a conflation there? I was like, well, then I asked you, I was like, well, is when you feel something, do you know something? He said, well, yeah, subjectively, if I feel it, I know it. So right from there, I caught him in a trap. So I told him, well, it's A and also not A. It's a contradiction. Like, so something is good, but you feel bad about it, which if it's the case that emotivism is just all of an expression of emotions, then that detangles, that untangles that argument, because obviously you have an emotion, but then there's something else there that that is good. So, it's many different ways where, we can kind of defeat someone's argument. But in regards to tag, because I've been getting into that a little bit, and from watching you, I've been having to Google words and research the type of people like Kant. I guess that's where the transcendental came from. He is one of basically
you asked me where does it come from?
Where does it come? Is it Kant the one that came up with the transcendentals? And also, is there a distinction between transcendentals and metaphysics, or is that basically the same?
There's overlap, but there's definitely distinctions here. So the type of argument that we're talking about, or a transcendental type of argument, is much earlier. This actually goes back to like Aristotle. I think it's Metaphysics Book 4, and he doesn't call it a transcendental argument, but it's something kind of like this, where in Aristotle it's more so it's called rhetorsion, which is where the sophists, who are people who don't believe in any truth or any laws of logic or anything like that, or any rationality, they come to Aristotle and they say, well, how do you know that logic actually works? Why should we even follow logic? And Aristotle's retorts is, well, if you denied logic, you would still be using logic to deny it. So you would be immediately caught in a contradiction. So to deny the law of non-contradiction would require logical consistency resting on the law of non-contradiction to say there is no law of non-contradiction. So it's a foolish from the outset type of position. And even though, Aristotle doesn't call that a transcendental argument, it's a similar type of form or structure. And as philosophy advances in the West and gets a little more sophisticated and technical, you get people like Immanuel Kant who work extensively in sort of drawing out a schema or a structure of what he calls transcendentals or preconditions. And really what he does is just kind of take what Aristotle called the categories of being, or categories of relation, things like quantity, quality, location, number, etc. These kinds of things that you can't identify necessarily as physical matter. And there's a lot of these, right? Numbers, logic, like they're not identical to stuff. They're not identical to molecules. If you watch the Stefan Molyneux debate that I did some years back, the first half of the debate is about that. And Stefan seemed to think that the number 7 is literally just identical to 7 things, 7 coconuts. And first half of the debate is basically showing how kind of silly that is to think that a number or a law or something law-like is identical to something physical, right? They're not the same, obviously. So that's a good kind of starting point for understanding the types of things that we're talking about that are in Kant repositioned and reimagined to be mental structures, whereas Aristotle saw these as sort of external, real metaphysical objects and relations and structures of the world. Kant says, well, I don't know if we can really know that. And so he basically makes these all structures within the mind. So I want to be very clear that transcendental argumentation is advanced by Kant, but Kant does not make a transcendental argument for God. In fact, Kant would probably think that's not sensible, that you can't use that type of logic argumentation for God's existence, because Kant ends up being kind of a fideist. He kind of thinks that you can't really even know what's going on outside of your own mind or in other people's minds. But he's really good at coming up with advancements in transcendental arguments, not the transcendental argument for God. So, for example, he makes a really good argument that, well, if you're going to have knowledge at all, whatever you think knowledge is, it seems like you got to have a knower, right? And there's some difference between the knower or the subject or the I, that's me, and the instances or the pieces or the propositions of knowledge that I gain. And who is the one or the I or the subject gaining the knowledge? Okay. And if there is an I or a subject, which I think he called it he uses this fancy term of just, he says the transcendental unity of apperception. He just means a subject having all of these perceptions and all these experiences. Can I find under a microscope J. Dyer or Cooley? Can I find that subject, that I, that you? No. I mean, you could say, well, I have a body and I've got eyes and, a heart, whatever. Okay, but none of those things are equated to the transcendental subject having the knowledge. And what is the storehouse of all of this knowledge? The mind, the soul, whatever, right? So Kant's basically saying that to have knowledge at all presupposes a subject, a person, an I. And you can't find that under a microscope or find that in a test tube or in the molecules, right? So this is an example of where Kant was really good, I think, in giving a type of transcendental argument, not for God, but in this case for something like God, the soul or the self or the subject. Yeah. And you could just say that it's a very similar move that we're doing with, if I'm arguing with an atheist and he says something like, all that exists is physical matter. And he's like, and you're, as a Christian, you're illogical. And I'm like, oh, really? So would you say that the laws of logic, because you just appealed to logic and reasoning, are the laws of logic matter, where under a microscope do you see the law of non-contradiction? Right? Where do you find this in a test tube? You don't. Okay. Where's the number 7? Where are quadratic equations in the physical world? They don't exist. Okay. In the physical world. So there are immaterial, abstract things. And in that Brian Shapiro debate, for example, he starts going on and on about free will. And I'm like, dude, do you understand that most modern philosophers who are atheists and agnostic, they don't even think free will is a thing? Free will is just as much a fairy tale as God to a lot of these philosophers. Yeah. And I just turned that on Brian and I said, why would you even believe in free will? If you think God's tooth fairy, let's say for the sake of argument, that kind of stuff, anything immaterial is tooth fairy. Well, free will is a metaphysical claim. Where is that in a test tube? Why would you believe in free will?
Yeah.
It's just a commitment that you have with no basis. And so if you can be arbitrary in a debate, guess what? I can be arbitrary in a debate. So most of the time in debates, you're going to be catching people in just being arbitrary. But if you get into these more specific subjects like what we're talking about with philosophy and transcendental arguments, those are types of things that Kant uses, Kant uses these preconditions and these categories to try to show that all of our beliefs and our assertions rest on these more fundamental things that are not physical, material, empirical objects.
Yeah,
and I heard again, you think about something else too. Easy, like not just morals or rights, but time. I mean, Kant makes good arguments that, I mean, you can't find what is time. Time is not. I mean, you could say, what's a measurement of change in the physical world, whatever. It's a movement of light, whatever you think it is. But time itself is not anywhere in the physical world.
Exactly. So there's and like the past as well. I heard you make many arguments about the past. So, and that was a unique one of, how you verbalize it. I also heard with the number 7, I actually heard you say, you made the argument basically, well, if I erase the number 7 on a chalkboard, does the number 7 not exist anymore? And that just, demonstrates how 7 is just not, a calculation of things. It's more than just that.
You want to know where I got that argument? The first day of college philosophy class, Intro to Philosophy 101. I'm serious. First day, the professor goes up on the chalkboard, and he was this kind of nerdy white guy with a voice like this, and he had a big old pot belly, and he would rest his hand on his pot belly, and he would have the chalk like this. Here you go. So this is number 7, and if I erase number 7, is there still a number 7? That was the first day of philosophy class.
Hey man, listen,
and, it's a great point because he's really illustrating.
Yeah, it helps you understand it as well too.
Yeah, he's illustrating Plato's point about the fact that in philosophy it's called the problem of the one and the many. Like, you can't just say there's particulars. If you only think there's particular objects, you're immediately caught in a difficult issue philosophically with sets or classes of things. And if you deny the set or the class of things, there's a whole host of problems that you have with universal claims and things like this. And what, for example, most atheists or materialists or empiricists don't realize is that when you're an empiricist or when you have that perspective, you're already boxing yourself in. I already know all the problems in that position that most of you atheists don't even know. So I can already just list out all this whole host of issues that will immediately catch you in a box that you put yourself in.
Yeah. I had, it's funny because the first time I heard the transcendental argument, it was actually from you. And I'm like, oh, this is a boss argument. I got to learn this. Because, if you watch my content, I'm debating people. I'm having fun doing it. I'm being entertaining. And I'm like, wait, he just said, please justify how you can make sentences. I'm like, that's boss talk. Don't speak to me. Now, when people come up and debate me, listen, don't speak to me unless you can justify how you can speak to me because I don't, then your sentences mean nothing. Justify your entire worldview. So I think that the transcendental argument for God was really one of the ones that was like, you can't defeat this. People tried to defeat it. They tried to critique it, but I really haven't heard it be refuted at all.
Yeah, most of the critiques end up being things that aren't really addressing the transcendental argument for God. Like, there's a famous paper that a philosophy guy named Barry Stroud wrote many years ago, and usually more astute philosophy-minded people, they say, oh, well, Barry Stroud refuted this kind of stuff. Well, really, Barry Stroud's just talking about Kant. and he's talking about how there's limitations in the Kantian perspective of transcendental arguments. Well, guess what? I agree with that. I'm not a Kantian. I'm an Orthodox Christian. So, we don't have to be bound to any single philosopher's system as Christians, as Orthodox, because I can take what's logically good and valid, whether it was Aristotle or Plato or Kant, and I don't have to accept Aristotelian, Platonic, or Kantian systems, right? So I have a freedom. And most philosophers this way, in the world today, are the same way. Like, nobody really just follows one dude in philosophy. People take good or bad arguments based on the arguments themselves, not whether or not we follow some person entirely. But I think it's an indefeatable argument because it's really impossible to deny preconditions of thought. You're in and I've been in debates where atheists or some people try to deny these types of things, and it's like they don't even realize that it's putting you in a way worse position than to admit there are preconditions, right? So if you want to say, okay, there's no laws of logic, there's no transcendental categories.
Well, I debated this one guy the other day. He said, well, it's just self-evident. It's just self-evident. Like, this is true. Like, it's just self-evident. What's your take